Module 15, Zen and Art. I, Dr. Rita Pratap, former head of the Department, Drawing and Painting, University of Rajasthan, Jaipur. I am going to speak on Japanese painting. The topic is Zen and Art. Towards the end of 12th century, another art of Buddhism was introduced to Japan by priests who had visited China and studied there. It was a sect that was widely embraced and which would eventually have found influence on all aspects of Japanese cultural life that was lasted to the present day. This new force was Zen Buddhism, known as Chan in China, where it had appeared some 6 centuries before, and it espoused the practice of meditation in order to directly achieve the enlightened awareness of truth, the method that Buddha himself had employed in his search for enlightenment. The Japanese found Zen a teaching perfectly suited to their needs. The Zen doctrine, that is, the Buddha's essence, is to be found in all things, appealed to men who lived very close to nature. Moreover, Zen appealed to the uneducated classes. No enlightenment could be gained through the written word. The sutras were irrelevant. The saying of the Bodhidharma, Japanese Daruma, the first Zen patriarch, is paraphrased this way: knowing the true mind is to achieve Buddhahood. It cannot be taught and it cannot be read. Masters passed teaching on to pupils and took on the aura of deities. Zen glorifies its patriarchs as no other sect does, in part because by banishing the icons it left little more than the founders in their place, given man's yearning for the direction and support from higher powers. Unquestionably far from the intention of the search for Buddha's nature within, the vacuum was left in the desire for a personified celestial spirit was filled by portraits of Zen monks, Chinsu, making a new genre of considerable artistic stature. Zen meditation, or dhyana, from the Chinese Chan, had once been brought over from China in the 9th century, but the social conditions were not then congenial, and it was until dated 1215, returned in 1191 from his second visit, that he received a serious attention. 2 branches of the sect became well established in Japan: Rinzai and Soto. Rinzai Zen, which caught the attention of the military and artistic circles, taught that enlightenment could come suddenly as the consequences of some Archimedean trigger that would in an instant remove mental blocks and open the mind to enlightenment. Rinzai monasteries maintained tough discipline and demanded that their adherents practice a rigorous life of hard work, meditation, and study, all qualities that were readily recognizable for samurai warriors who were used to such austerities and who became avid followers of the sect. The other form, Soto Zen, was more popular among the rural people, and while hardly more gently than Rinzai, it promoted the ideas that enlightenment would comes slowly like the piecing together of a jigsaw puzzle. As a result of diligent meditation and hard work. The effect of Zen on art was far reaching and can immediately be recognized in many of the paintings and ceramics and even costumes and folk crafts that are illustrated. The most concise explanation was put forward some decades ago by the writer Shinichi Hisamatsu, who suggested that there are 7 characteristics which determine the nature of Zen aesthetics, and that these should be recognizable in any work of an artist or artisan who had either trained in Zen or was imbued with the spirit. Leaving the philosophical background aside, for the sake of simplicity, the recognition of these characteristics can help in the understanding of Zen art. They are briefly described as follows. First, asymmetry. A sharp contrast can be seen between the Heian, mandalas and Buddhist compositions, which are all composed to form a perfectly symmetrical arrangement, and works by any of the Zen painters whose works all show an asymmetrical composition. The Heian idea was to picture perfection, but Zen teaches that such a concept is in itself a barrier to the higher truth and has to be broken through. This idea carries through not only in art but in daily practice. For example, a container of flowers will be placed slightly to one side of a tokonomo, and the flowers too will be simply arranged leaning out to one side, just as they might appear naturally at the side of a path in the countryside. Likewise, the elements in a Zen painting will be arranged in an interesting asymmetrical way, with mountains grouped at one side or a figure facing out of the frame of the picture. Second, simplicity. The Zen mind tries to keep uncluttered, as anything that is not necessary or in its rightful place is considered to be an impediment. This discipline can be seen in a tea room which has no furniture and is kept scrupulously clean and free from any clutter. The only adornment might be an ink painting and wild flower or two in the tokonoma, and because there is no other visual distraction, these items can be seen and appreciated better in their own pure state. A Zen trained painter could reveal the colors of ink in his work and could make ice look colder, a lake deeper, the fall leaf more russet than would be seen on a more superficial level by using colors. Third, astringency or dryness. It implies the qualities associated with age, of being wintry worn and weathered. The opposite of the springtime is full fleshed youth and luscious sensuality. In Zen inspired art, human figures are bony and sinewy, lined and wizened with much experience of life. All that is unnecessary has been left out, and what remains is reduced to the basic concentrated essence, like that of a dried persimmon or the thick resin of an ancient pine tree. The fourth is the naturalness. In Zen art, naturalness does not imply mere naive innocence, and in fact, it can only be attained after gaining so much experience that the act of creating something can be done spontaneously with no mind. This is illustrated in the story of an old painter who, when asked how long it had taken him to paint a bamboo, replied 50 years and 5 minutes. 50 years studying the bamboo and 5 minutes to paint it. The fifth is the profundity or reserve. This refers to the withholding quality of Zen art. Not anything is revealed at once, and the viewer has to make an effort in order to fully appreciate the object. It is seen more profoundly in early ink paintings, which, even though small in format, have such depth that they are like a portal to another world. This profundity certainly cannot be faked, and it takes the hand of an artist steeped in Zen to achieve this special atmosphere. A darkness achieved with ink that is calm and free from danger, as opposed to the darkness seen in many of the earlier Buddhist paintings, which is uneasy and threatening. The greatest of the early Zen masterpieces may have layers of meaning, and their full qualities can only be appreciated by contemplation and by opening the mind. Sixth, non-attachment. Even though highly disciplined, the true Zen adept will have a free spirit that can often appear to be very odd, and many of the more celebrated figures of the sect have also been quite eccentric and unconventional. Adherence to any fixed way of thinking, any ism, whether religious, political, is a constraint of the spirit and the mind. In Zen painting, the artist has to discard any regulations or rules so that the mind can apply itself directly and freely without any mental fetters. The freedom can extend to everyday practice, and a true Zen artist would never worry that if his brush was broken, he would be unable to paint. He would be able to free himself from this convention and paint with his fingers or a handful of straw. The seventh point is tranquility. The last of the characteristic refers to the soul of the artist, which has to be quiet and undisturbed and in a meditative state of calm before he puts brush to paper. Any agitated state or stress will be unmistakably revealed in the painting, and so an artist or a calligrapher will always sit quietly for a moment or two before working, not to think about the painting or what he is going to write, but to empty his mind, to think about nothing. And in this state, and after years of training, and his hand can act directly from his spirit. Thus, all these 7 characteristics would be a qualification of Zen art. They all have to manifest themselves together in some way. As contact with China was resumed, increasing number of Japanese reformists Buddhist masters like Isai, who was from 1141 to 1015, and Dogen 1200 to 1253, studied there and brought back the self-reliant teaching known as Chan or Zen in Japanese. He gained support of Hojo Tokiyori and built the Canon-ji in Kyoto in 1202. His form of Zen in Kyoto was a Tendai mix, however, based on Rinzai, Chinese Lin Chi. The teaching of Zen was ascetic and pragmatic and eschewed all external rituals. This no-nonsense approach held a strong appeal for the Japanese warrior class and soon found official patronage. Zen monasteries in Chinese style, constructed by trained Chinese builders, were found in quick succession. The Canon-ji 1202, Tofuku-ji 1243 in Kyoto, and the Kencho-ji 1253 and Engaku-ji 1282 in Kamakura. The Engaku-ji was the first real Zen temple. Today, only one building has survived, the Great Kanto earthquake. An early temple founded by Ashikaga Yoshikane in 1188 and converted to Zen, the Zomyo-ji in East Kamakura, and today of little significance, is the fifth, outranked by the Joshi-ji built by Hojo Morotoki in 1283. Zufuku-ji, built by Yoritomo's wife around 1200, is the first Zen temple of Kamakura. The Kencho-ji, the ranking temple of the city, and Engaku-ji, second in importance to it, were put up in 1250 and 1282. But both these temples were razed by fire time after time. A genre of patriarchal portraiture, Shinso, often charting a master's active life, flourished proliferation of Zen monasteries. Shinzo represents the essential, personal and direct transmission of the law. A portrait of the master with an appropriate inscription of dedication was given to the disciple only when he had achieved a measure enlightenment. It acknowledged the bond of karma, which formed an important part of the disciple's life. Many portraits of famous masters were brought back by grateful Japanese disciples. The personal message from mind to mind strengthened the disciples' spiritual self-control. John Fontaine and Mani Hickman have observed that there is perhaps no other form of Chinese and Japanese art in which painting and calligraphy are so intimately connected in their purpose and meaning. In 1246, the great southern Shung Chan master Liangqi Delong, from 1213 to 1278, arrived in Japan. 2 years later, he went to Kamakura and converted the Hojo regent Tokiyori. A magnificent monastery, Kencho-ji, was built on the slopes just north of the city and was inaugurated in 1253, with Delong at its founding abbot. This was the first purely Chinese Chan ritual ever held in Japan. With shogunal patronage, Zen quickly spread throughout Japan. A portrait of Lanqui Dalong detailed on silk. It is a hanging scroll with colophon by Dalong dated 1271 in the Kenchoji by an unknown Japanese painter show that the founder about 7 years before death. He is seated in the master's high chair, feet tucked under his habit, holding his staff and obscuring the world attentively with benign yet stern eyes. He looks young for his age, nearly 70. Despite his slight and bony frame, his skin is clear and firm. The fluid undulating ink brush strokes show direct Shung influence, as does the coloration in the transparent washes of dark and light browns. It was said that Zen painting was not merely a matter of technique. Any painting that by its theme and treatment helped to cleanse the mind and lead to awareness of eternal things could be said to embody Zen ideals. Accompanying Zen Buddhism was also tea ceremony and a cult of aestheticism, which reached heights of dedication and of ineffectiveness in the 17th and 18th centuries. An example is of the Togondo, a sukiya or a tea house built by Shuko in the northeast corner of which is a small tea room of 4.5 mats. The oldest known tea room and the prototype for many later ones. The room is simple and plain and fully Zen in concept. The aim of the Zen painter was always to try and capture the essence of the subject rather than depict it photographically. And this ideal includes the concepts of aware, which is beauty of an emotional, slightly sad, bitter, sweet quality, and yugen, an ever deeper, more mysterious resonance. Spirit of Zen can be seen in almost all aspects of cultural life. Through the Muromachi period in painting, architecture, ceramic, pottery, the no dramas, and in the utensils for tea ceramics. The practice of tea or chan no yu is essentially the experience of Zen for the layman, and this more than anything was the vehicle by which the teaching was disseminated to the laity outside the precincts of the monasteries. Suibokuga means water and ink pictures and refers to the majority of paintings that were made by Zen artists throughout the Muromachi period. Zen portraiture. This type of painting was for a definite purpose, that is, used in quite different technique. An essential tenet of Zen doctrine was that illumination was attained by direct intuition, aided by a stimulus that passes like an electric current from master to disciple. After years of study, bullying, and humiliation, the pupil might, on graduation as it were, receive a portrait of his master that served as a diploma, certifying to his having attained his enlightenment and to his right to wear the mantle of his teacher. These portraits, called Chinzo, were executed with reverent care, and the best of them are deeply penetrating studies, not only to the physical appearance of the master, but also of his character, insight, and dignity. The greatest exponent of this type of portrait painting was Cho Densu, 1352 to 1431, a professional painter attached to Tofukuji, which today still treasures his masterpiece. The portrait of the national master of Zen teaching, Abbot Sho Ichi, in the collection of Kyoto, Japan. In Kamakura period, the clear-sighted Zen view of the world injected a striking new realism into Japanese portraiture of the period. Some early examples are set of the portraits in Jingoji Temple in Kyoto, attributed to Fujiwara Takanobu. The portrait of the shogun Minamoto no Yoritomo is still tinged with some Heian opacity and formality. It has been considered rude in Heian times to copy a person's likeness. But here the artist has not hesitated to bring out his subject's thick lips, protruding mouth, suggesting buck teeth, small ear lobes, flat cranium, and slightly rounded narrow nose, and above all, his vehement and ruthless personality. For Zen was but one aspect of the culture of southern Sung, and it was Shung culture as a whole that upper ranks of Japanese society now sought to acquire as eagerly as their forebears and modeled themselves on that of the tongue. One of the earliest and certainly the most powerful of patrons of Shung culture was the shogun Yoshimitsu, who ruled from 1367 to 1395. At the Golden Pavilion at Kyoto, to which he retired, he led the life of a monk aesthete and patron of arts. Yoshimitsu liked to be carried about in a Chinese litter, wearing Chinese costumes, and the nobles at court followed him in aping Chinese fashions. The eighth shogun, Yoshimara, who ruled from 1449 to 1474, tried to keep up this elegant and luxurious patronage, though with less authority and fewer resources. Under him, as a historian, Sir George Sampson put it, the Muromachi aesthete reached and passed its fullest bloom, dropping its full-blown petals one by one as the 15th century drew to a close. The rule of Yoshimara is curiously parallel to that of the Shung Emperor Huitosung, whose passion of arts likewise blinded him to the dangers into which his country was drifting. For Huitosung, the end was the Tatar invasion of 1125. For Yoshimara, the Oman War of 1467 to 1477 that reduced Kyoto to ashes. The painting brought to Japan to enrich the great collections of Yoshimitsu and Yoshimura were not in the contemporary Ming style. The Zen monks who chiefly collected these pictures were not interested in the works of Yuan and Ming literati. Rather, their contacts with the Zen monasteries and the paintings they sought were paintings in monochrome ink by the Chinese Zen masters such as Mu Chi and Liang Kai. Besides that, it was of no importance to them as this style of painting had long gone out of fashion in China itself. A taste for painting in monochrome ink was thus created among the aristocracy and military elite of Japan. Further, purchasing expeditions sent by the shoguns sought out secular landscapes in the same style by Ma Yuan, Ma Lin, and He Kui. This explains why it is that many of the finest surviving works by painters of Southern Sung Academy are today to be found in Japan.